So, I've been thinking a lot about how we could have a simple contraption to work with the crafter that could make the most out of Minecraft's new automatic crafting feature. And I think I've come up with something that's going to be accessible for a lot of players, and I'm calling it the Universal Crafter Module. This is one simple contraption to craft almost whatever you need. And before we go any further, this message is just for those of you that are out of the loop. If you have not seen the crafter block, you want to go and check out this video where it is introduced in that snapshot. It adds automated crafting to the game, and I think the use case we're most likely to use this for is in farming, spots where automation actually makes a lot of sense. For example, a guardian farm where you get lots of drops that could be turned into prismarine bricks or sea lanterns. So one of the things we'll do with this contraption is actually stockpile all of the ingredients for the crafting recipe inside of the crafter itself. The reason being that if you don't want this level of crafting, it's quite likely that you're going to be scraping some materials out of a chest just to craft a few items for some armor or some weapons, or maybe just to craft a few different building blocks for a build that you're about to undertake. You can of course craft slabs and stairs and anything you like with this universal crafting module. The key thing to remember though is that it keeps a stockpile in here. Now I mentioned that this was almost universal because if you want to make crafting recipes with 4 or 5 ingredients, then you're going to have to modify the contraption you see here a little. And if you want to make something like dispensers or cake, you're going to have to find a way to pre-stock these ingredients. But I do have a bonus contraption for you this video. It's what might possibly be the world's smallest dispenser crafter, so stick around for that. For now, we're going to get into the details of this Universal Crafter module, and obviously it auto-crafts based on the materials that you feed into it. For example, here we've got some dried kelp, which you can turn into dried kelp block. The farm has a manual on-off switch, but what's important here is that it can turn itself off without breaking, so you don't actually need to install this lever. This thing automatically crafts. So what happens if you happen to run out of a certain material? Well, as you're about to see here, the comparator on the side can detect a lack of items, which will safely turn off the clock without doing any additional crafting. So this means when the materials come back in again, your crafter here is going to preserve the same recipe. And then the items go back in and it continues crafting. It also has this clock built into it, which can be customized based on what it is you are automatically crafting. So for kelp, it needs 5 ticks of delay. If we open up the crafter here, you'll see it gets fully restocked before it crafts each time. If it didn't do this, eventually it could actually run out and mistakenly craft something different, but that wouldn't be the case for dried kelp. If you were crafting iron blocks, for example, and the contraption failed to fully refill, you can see that there are other things it might accidentally craft instead. So thanks to the clock and the way this thing works, that isn't going to be a problem. No accidental crafting. There is also a comparator down below that can lock this clock safely too. So if ever your storage backs up and fills up all the way, the contraption will turn off the clock and stop auto crafting. And I'm telling you all of this because each recipe is unique and it does require some custom configuration. For example, this recipe right here, you'll notice that it actually fills up really quickly before it crafts again. That is because it creates 4 items at a time, and we can actually run this contraption at 5 ticks a second. The issue is some items will be spat out into the world if this hasn't filled up correctly. So this time we're going to see some items pop out somewhere. There they go. Yeah, and that's something that you don't want. This is because the hopper speed here throttles it. It just occurred to me, if you just had a double chest with 2 hoppers, then this wouldn't be an issue. The point being though that each recipe is unique and needs a little configuration, especially if it ejects more than 1 item. That may become an issue if you don't set it up correctly. Now at each of these modules you can feed in 3 different items, and because I put the same on each one, it means we can craft as fast as possible. So with a 2x2 recipe, you can have just 2 ticks of delay and it will fill up every time it crafts your dripstone. And there are a lot of 2x2 recipes that just have 1 ingredient, so that's a pretty universal design there. Another common one is to have 1 unique item in the middle of a bunch of others. So for this, with 2 hoppers feeding in that unique item, you need a clock speed of 7, and that gives it enough time to fill up every ingredient before crafting again. Now when you need 4 or 5 ingredients, sadly it loses its sort of universal design as you have to customize it with some additional redstone. But as you'll see in this hopper, one of the key things to do is to have the ingredient of the next one inside of there too. So when it needs either the rabbit or the mushroom, this hopper here is going to be able to feed it in. So to set this up, you kind of just want to copy what's going on directly alongside it with the comparator, the redstone, and the redstone torch, but then you need a little bit of extra redstone here. And this is a great opportunity to explain what this does. The clock down below can be turned off by powering this redstone. So if ever you run out of materials in your hopper feeding into the crafter, it will turn on a torch and it will stop the clock. Let's say the redstone is just coming from a nearby farm and some starts to come through again, then the thing can continue crafting until you run out again. And of course, this just stops the contraption from breaking. So with 5 ingredients, we've created an extension of that just makes the contraption a little bit bigger. And with just 4 ticks of delay, the contraption can still work. If you really needed this thing to run faster, you could actually add a 4th hopper at the front here. Then of course, you're going to be running your redstone around the side here to the back. Alright, we got the bonus crafter dispenser coming up. Then I'm going to show you how to build this thing. First though, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I occasionally make contraptions like this, and most of the time I bring you the news on the Minecraft snapshots. So thanks for listening, let's crack on. This is it, my friends, the dispenser crafter. Not a lot to look at. Not a lot of redstone down below. You can probably start to see how this works now. String and sticks at the back to make the bows. Redstone and cobblestone, of course that crafter points into this one. So we power the one at the front whilst locking the hoppers on either side. Then we power the one behind it to put a new bow in. So we get our dispenser and then, hey, it fills back up again. That is it in its purest form. Of course, you can put a container here to pick up the items. You could hook it up to a clock as well. And you could put barrels up here to feed more items in. This is all thanks to Gulbaroo, who sent me this tweet showing this design. So thank you for sharing that redstone with the community. It is an awesome, snug little contraption. So thank you again, Gulbaroo, for sharing. Their tweet is in the description box if you want to go say thanks and interact. While I was recording this video, Cybot pointed out a flaw with it. And it was actually a last little bit of compacting where I didn't realize that I was just taking away something I'd already fixed. This is the way that it should be properly set up. The redstone should be at this level here. Otherwise, the redstone points directly into the block. You don't actually need that there to turn off this torch. The reason we have it set up like this with 2 redstone is so that these hoppers don't completely empty. And I think it may not really matter because one of the things that we do is stockpile a lot of the ingredients in the crafter itself. So in terms of size, this thing is 3 blocks wide, 7 blocks tall, 5 blocks deep, and of course you need to keep a gap between each contraption and the next one in case you're lining a bunch of these up in a row. Each one will require these ingredients, so you can pause the video, grab all of those materials. And again, you can pause the video and recreate what you see here as this is your first slice of building the contraption. And I recommend powering the lever so the clock is off as you'll want to set that up later. The next part we build will control the torches that override the clock for crafting. It's important that one side of this comparator has a redstone block as that creates a signal that interacts with that comparator. And then on top of the block on either side, you're going to be putting these comparators. Then we have our redstone dust, but it all connects, which we don't actually want. So we put additional blocks up the top here, and then around the back in go the redstone torches. And believe it or not, we're pretty much done with the contraption. You put the hoppers in front of the comparators and then some storage on top of it. These don't have to be barrels, they can be chests, they can be hooked up to your farms. You just need to get the items into the crafter. And then you want to set the crafter up, so don't forget that some recipes will require you to disable certain slots. Then you want to make sure that you got items inside of each of these hoppers and that the items inside of the crafter are fully stocked up. Then you'll be able to activate the clock, and if you set the repeaters up like here, you're not going to have any issues, but then you can check what's going on in the crafter and perhaps speed this thing up a bit. And those are all of the steps involved in creating a single module. Of course, it gets a lot more complicated if you want to have multiple modules crafting various recipes from the materials you obtain from your farms. You're probably going to end up with like a tangle of hopper chains going all over the place, but the key thing with this design is that you can build it over and over again to work with lots of different recipes. And that brings me to the end of this one. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. If you're looking for more Minecrafty tutorials, there is a playlist in the description box down below. But that's it, so thanks and see you in the next one. Bye bye.